I'm Liz Davey, and you're watching A Walk in the Garden on NCTV, Norfolk Community Cable Station. I'm happy to have you join me in my garden today. It's a nice fall day. We have gone overnight from t-shirt weather to turtleneck weather. We had some unusually warm weather the last week or so, and now we are getting some cooler days. I'm in my herb garden, and as you can see, it's covered with oak leaves. Oak leaves make reasonably good mulch in the winter, and I will leave them on the herb garden. We will probably remove most of them from the lawn, but the way they're blowing today, they may all be gone all by themselves, blowing into the woods. But the leaves on the herb garden will stay and provide some insulation for the herbs over the winter. Oak leaves are good because they don't mat down like the maple leaves do, so you can leave a little thicker layer of those on your plants. However, I have a few roses in this garden that need a little extra protection, and what I have done, or I'm doing, is raking out around the rose itself. It will soon have plenty of oak leaves on it, and I'm going to add a layer of compost. Now, it's a little early to do it. It's nice if the ground has frozen, which it has not yet because of our warm days. But I want to add just a bucket of compost around the roots of all of my roses. And I will do it between now and December. Usually around Thanksgiving is a good time to do it. It's a little early. We're just a couple weeks into November. But this gives them not only some insulation around the roots, but also some fertilizer that will start to promote growth when spring comes in April or May. We do have a few things that can be picked in the herb garden. You may have to dig a little for them through the leaves. There's thyme, and of course there's sage that can be used for Thanksgiving. Awfully good in the Thanksgiving stuffing, both thyme and sage. And I still could pick a few chives if I dug down a little bit and really needed them. We also have some parsley that is still doing just fine. It will take a light frost, but it will not take the heavy ones that are coming soon. There's also a little sorrel that has sprouted when the rain started in the fall. We got a whole new crop of young sorrel, and that also can be used in salads. Now let's head over to the perennial garden and see what's going on there. I've been busy in the perennial garden. I have cut back a few of the plants that were finished, especially the non-native ones. And I've also dug up any dahlias that were in this garden. I've cut back the iris, and they took up quite a bit of space. And I've left the native plants, the grasses, and some of the others that have seeds on them that the birds might enjoy. I have a group of plants called phlomis, and that's spelled with a P-H-L-O-M-I-S. It's an interesting plant with an interesting seed head in the spring, but it's not real good in the winter here. It sometimes will winter kill. So what I'm going to do is sprinkle some straw on it for the winter. And again, it's a little early to do it, but the cool weather is on its way, and I want to make sure I don't miss it this year. I have a few perennials like that, and especially any newer ones. If you have planted things this fall, oftentimes there are some good buys on perennials in the fall. And if you've added new things to your garden, it's probably a good idea to mulch them with either pine needles or leaves, or I have some straw and I'm using that. This will get raked off in the spring. It also marks the place where the phlomis will be coming up. Again, it looks a lot different when the iris is gone and a few of the other taller perennials. I've left the asters in the garden. I haven't cut them back. I'll do that in the spring. Also the butterfly weed seed pods, which they're still going to seed. And again, they add some interest to the garden. I have another rose here, and that too will be layered with some compost and leaves to protect it over the winter. But as you can see, it still has leaves on it, and some of the roses still even have blooms. It's been an extremely warm fall up until last night and tonight. We've had a light frost, but it's been quite light. Another thing that I need to do at this point in this garden is a soil test. This is the season for soil testing, and I have the form here that I downloaded from UMass Extension, and then you can go online and get all the information that you need to perform a soil test. And what I need to do now is collect the soil sample, and there are very thorough instructions on how to do it. And you do need to dig down, and you need to, if you haven't raked off an area, rake it off. You don't want any leaves in it. But what I want to do is go down 6 or 8 inches, even lower, and dig out a sample of soil. And I don't need a very big one at this point. I want to remove any rocks, which is always a problem. And then I'm going to do this, and I'm not going to do it in front of the camera, but I will do this in 12 different places throughout my perennial garden, which means I will have a bucket that's about half full of soil when I'm finished. I'll mix the soil and then measure out 1 cup and then put it on a piece of clean paper to dry. They don't want any damp samples. And once it is dried, all the leaves and stones have been picked out. It's dry. And then I'll put it in a plastic bag, fill out my form, and send it to them in a padded envelope. And in a couple weeks, they will send me back my soil test. I will know whether I need to add lime or what other things that I might need to add to this garden. It's been a while. I don't usually fertilize that much, so I am looking for some information. I'm suspecting I might need to put a little lime on it at this point, and I will see what my soil test tells me, and I will share it with you when we get it back. But it's time to do it now. They are rushed in the spring. Everybody wants to do it in the spring, and they want their results right away. So if you can get out there and get your soil harvested right now and sent in, you'll be able to have your results and be all ready to go when spring comes. Another rose here, and this has a clematis as well attached to it. And again, that will get compost and asters that I've left and sedum autumn joy. And these, I will pick some of these to use in my winter arrangements. And they can be spray painted once they've dried a bit more, or even now, you can spray paint them with either gold or silver, white, or dark red. And they add to outdoor arrangements very nicely, or indoor ones for that matter. But they need to dry a little bit more on the plant before they can be picked and used in my arrangements. It's time to look around and find other things that you might want to put in with greens for winter arrangements. And seed pods are also good. And again, they can be sprayed. Once they've lost all their fluff, you spray them with a little gold paint, silver paint, and they can be added to arrangements as well. You'll see a lot of green in this garden, and those are grape hyacinths, which have kind of taken over in a few spots. I probably should get rid of a few of them, but I do like the sea of green or sea of blue that they provide in the spring when the tulips and daffodils are also in bloom. The poppies have all been cut down as well. I have numerous oriental poppies, and I have cut those back all the way. The poppy foliage, if it stays on the plant, can promote disease, so taking it off is quite essential. Again, more asters, and I have lavender, and lavender is usually pretty hardy, but if we have an extremely hard winter, it is not. Therefore, I'm going to cover it with a basket full of leaves once the weather really turns cold. and that'll probably be in a couple more weeks. Sometimes we've even had snow by this time, but this year it's been so warm. But I just cover the plant, the whole plant, and then I'll put a rock on top to hold it down for the winter. It looks a little strange, I do admit, but it also works with chrysanthemums. And this chrysanthemum is still in bloom, and once it is no longer in bloom, I'll just kind of fold up the foliage. I don't cut the chrysanthemums back, but I do cover them with a basket and leaves. And they make it through. This one has been here maybe 5 years. So, and another lavender up this way. I've left the foliage on the Shasta daisies. They could be cut back, but I'll probably leave them for spring. I like to have something in the garden for the winter. Definitely have left the ironweed, which has some nice seeds on it, which the little birds will enjoy. Chickadees, wrens, they all will enjoy coming and tasting the seeds there. The oriental poppies, though they bloom in the spring and then the foliage goes away, put up new foliage in the fall, and that foliage will also die back and then come back in the spring. It's perfectly normal. It's not a result of our strange weather. It happens every year. I have a number of daylilies, and usually I remove the foliage on those, but so far the foliage has stayed green, so we'll wait a little longer on those. I'm going to move over to this way, and again, anything that you planted this year, you want to be sure to put some mulch of some sort on. Wood chips on chrysanthemums supposedly are not so good, so you want to stick with something that's a little lighter and doesn't mat down. Leaves, straw, pine needles, something like that. Coming up this way, I have a small anemone that I put in this fall, and I have the straw here to put on it once the weather gets a little colder and it starts to die back or completely dies back. Again, a lot of the leaves will blow away, but I leave the leaves on the plants throughout the winter. Now let's head over to the vegetable garden and see what's going on there. I'm ready to clean up the vegetable garden, but it's not ready to be cleaned up just yet. We're still getting a number of vegetables. The broccoli continues to put on side shoots, and some fairly large heads of broccoli are being harvested. About once a week I can get at least a meal, maybe two, from my broccoli still. It's been a wonderful year for broccoli, at least this fall. I still have some celery and arugula, lettuce, bok choy, parsley, and some lettuce. So we've been able to have some salads. And of course kale, which is extremely hardy and will last well through fall. I also have Brussels sprouts. Oh, and last month we planted the garlic for next year, and we have a row of that covered with straw right here. That will stay and come up next spring. Or it may even come up this fall if we get any more warm days. If it does come up, if you planted it really early in October this year, and your garlic does sprout, don't worry about it, it'll be just fine. It'll still come up next spring. I have a couple sections of parsley in the garden, and I have some straw next to it, ready to cover that as the weather gets colder. And we'll leave that until spring. Don't pull out your parsley, because more than likely it will come back up next spring and you'll be able to harvest parsley for a spring crop before it goes to seed. And then you'll plant new parsley that will be available later in the season and last through next winter. So parsley can stay for a very long time. We still have a few flowers. Most of the flowers went with the last light frost. The zinnias and the cosmos are gone and have been removed to the compost pile. What I'm going to do today is pick one of my Brussels sprout stalks. We've already had one stalk, and I'm using the big guys on that. These are a big set of pruners, and this is tough to cut. It's a very strong stem, and basically I'll just nip it off with these and then remove the leaves, and usually they just pull right out. In fact, they start to go and come out even more easily. You'll see stalks like this in the grocery store sometimes. I guess that indicates they are fresh. That one doesn't come off that easy. But you get the idea. There we go. Just need a little harder tug. And then I can take these inside and I'll snip them off the stalk, and then we can clean them up and cook with them. We have a variety of sizes. I like to roast them. I would imagine we may serve a few of them. One stalk at Thanksgiving. I have quite a few stalks left, and I can also freeze some of them. They respond by light blanching in boiling water and then cool water, and then you can freeze them and take them out and roast them later for a winter meal. But they'll be picked in the next couple weeks as the weather turns cooler and winter starts to emerge. I have Piracicaba here. This is a broccoli relative, and it just puts up little stalks. It's very much like the broccolini that you buy in the grocery store. But its name is Piracicaba. It's a, I think, South American variety. And it just keeps going, and you can pick these little top stalks, very good sauteed with a little balsamic vinegar and a few raisins in it, or other fruit. Cranberries are good with it too. I have a few carrots left. My house bunny is enjoying the carrot greens very much, as well as some of these other greens. He gets a handful of greens a couple times a day from the garden. I guess we'll have to buy them once winter really sets in. Now I'm going to go over and work on my flowers, my dahlias. I had a whole row of dahlias along this fence area and down a little further past the trellis. And I've taken most of them out. And I'm left one to show you how I do it. And I'm basically going to cut the stems at the base about 1 inch or maybe a little less from the soil line. And I'll get rid of the foliage. I guess we didn't cut one completely. There. Get rid of all the foliage, which will go in my compost. And I can take off the wire and add it to the collection of wires that came off the others. Now when you dig up your dahlias, you have to be aware that the roots are tender, and if you run the fork too close to the plant, you may break one of the roots, the corms that are underneath. So you want to kind of pull it out. And you'll see we have a lot of dahlias, and this can be divided. Many of these have individual heads, so I'll probably be able to divide this into several pieces in the spring with a sharp knife. In the meantime, this will go out into my garden shed for a few days. I have some newspaper laid out. It's sunny in there, and we will put this out and then shake it a bit to get as much loose soil off as I can. And then I have a box with pine needles in it, dry pine needles. Incidentally, I find here there's one bulb that's dried out and is not going to make it. So that one we'll pull off, whoops, and throw away. Anything that is shriveled like this, or looks like it has rotted, you want to take off either with clippers or just pull it off, because you don't want to store that in with the others. It can promote disease. And then what I'll do once they have dried is I'll move them into my cool bedroom for the winter. I have an unused room that we keep fairly cool, and they have done quite well in there over the years. So that's what we'll do with it. And if you have a cellar or a bulkhead area that stays cool, you don't want to be below freezing, but somewhere between 45, 50 is a good temperature for overwintering these types of bulbs. I also have canna lilies in some of my containers, and those will also need to be dug. Right now they still have a lot of green foliage. The broccoli was hit, or broccoli, the begonias were hit by the last frost, so their foliage is all turned brown, and that tells me it's time to pull the roots and store them for the winter. Now let's head back and see what's happening in the back of the yard. Winter's a long season in New England, and I have some large planters that are outside as well as window boxes that I don't take inside. And I like to fill them in the winter with something that is a little decorative. It adds to the Christmas decorations, and also they last through the winter. And it also is a good time to cut my evergreens and prune them, so it's a win-win situation. I've started this one. It's not a finished product yet. I still have more greens to add. This was the first container to be empty. It had coleus, and the frost just swept right in, and I had dying coleus, so that all came out of the planter. And what I've done is I just put the evergreens into the soil, and they will stay until spring quite well. They will also freeze in, so you won't get them out again until probably about April. I've also picked some of the sedum and red twig dogwood. Red twig dogwood, in order to get the nice red twigs, needs to be pruned down every year. It's in my perennial garden, and it's getting quite tall, so I will prune that and use it in the middle of my containers to add some extra height. I also have holly, arborvitae, plenty of hemlock, and holly, some with and some without berries. I've got a nice berried stalk in here, but it's fun to arrange these and have them for the holidays. And you can add any type of dried flowers as well. Some things do better than others. Pine cones are good, although be aware that when pine cones get wet, they shrink up, they close right up. So pine cones are great on a dry day, but not so much on a wet one if you have a lot of large cones. This is a plant called Leucothwae from my shade garden, and it too is a pretty good grower, so it can use a little pruning, and this is a nice time to do it as we get into the winter weather. It stays evergreen all winter, which I like, because that means it isn't just brown or white. In New England, the last few years, we've had more brown than white, so it's nice to have a little green mixed in. The plant behind me that you'll see the bright red leaves is a oak leaf hydrangea, and one of the reasons I like it is because of this lovely leaf color that appears in the fall. It has blooms, which I generally cut off. They are, once they have gone by, not too attractive, so they can be just composted. But the leaves, until they fall, are a gorgeous dark color, red or a dark purple, and really add to the landscape. Incidentally, they can also be dried if you have saved an old phone book or have an old magazine or a couple heavy books. Just put them in the book and you'll find that they dry nicely, and then you can use the leaf as a decoration for Thanksgiving or a table decoration. But they do need to be dried or they won't stay flat. Now let's take that dahlia back and put it in the shed and see what's happening back there. Okay, I'm going to take the dahlias that we dug and put them in my shed, joining the others that are here. I have a plexiglass window in my shed, and so it gets quite bright in here. And the temperature goes up quite nicely too. It's up to 70 inside the shed, but outside the shed it's a little less than that, more in the 50s. I'll put some more pine needles in this box, and this is how I'll be storing them. If you don't have a box to put them in, you could use a cardboard box or even a paper grocery bag. Just put something that's absorbent, like pine needles, in the bottom, or even vermiculite or peat. Peat is kind of out of favor, but if you happen to have some, you definitely can use it for this. These will go inside. And we'll do the same thing with the cannas, and those I'll probably use a paper bag. You'll note that the net is off the pond, but we still have a few leaves coming in, and I've taken all of the piping out. The waterfall has been moved into the house and the pump for the winter, and winterized it, and I use my net to remove some of the leaves. But some of them will still fall to the bottom of the pond and be removed when I clean next spring, or they'll just break down. The fish are still active, and up until today they were being fed their winter food because it was warm. But as they become less active and the water temperature goes down below 50, I will stop feeding them. And they will move a lot slower until ultimately when it starts to freeze over, you'll see the fish just moving very, very slowly. Their metabolism is tied to their environment. And when it gets cold, they move very slowly. I have a tile in there, a flue tile, where they can hide, and also I've kept my heron out. This is the time of year that I lost my fish about 5 years ago to a blue heron. They can see it because there's no leaves on the trees, and they swoop down and they have a meal. After eating the fish that I had then, which were quite large, I'm not sure how he took off to fly away because he had a full belly for sure. But they disappear very quickly, and I'm hoping that the tile and the fake heron will help protect them. I do have the ice melter ready to go, and it's right here, and as the temperature gets down into the 30s, this will go into the pond and be plugged in, and it keeps a hole in the ice, and this provides a vent for any toxic gases that would form under the ice and kill the fish, because the fish, though they move slowly, are still producing waste, and the vegetative matter that sinks to the bottom of the pond also produces some gases, and you need to exhaust those gases to keep the fish alive. So you need a hole in the ice. You don't need much of one, but this little device will provide that hole. It just melts a little bit. Some people leave an aerator in their pond, and this causes the flow of water, or the waterfall. They can leave a waterfall going as well. And that also keeps a hole in the ice so that the fish do not expire over the winter. I've had good luck with just a little ice melter. It only works when the temperature is low enough to form ice. So you're not using quite as much electricity as you would with the waterfall or the aerator running all the time. Now let's head up towards the house. I got a new bird feeder this year. My brother-in-law is a wonderful wood crafter, and he sent me a bird feeder, a new one, to replace the one that had seen better days. In fact, it had completely fallen apart before last season ended. He redesigned his design, and I think this one will last a bit longer. And it's filled with sunflower seed, which the birds are really going after. I have filled it almost once a day for the last 2 weeks. I think I need to make another trip to the store. I have a hanging feeder as well that I'll put up as soon as my planter stops producing flowers, which will be fairly soon, I would bet. But we've enjoyed watching the birds from inside, and we've seen such a big variety of birds. I think having plants that produce seeds for them in the summer really gives us a lot of birds in the winter and a big variety to watch. And again, they have been really crowding into the feeders, sometimes having some skirmishes along the way as they try to all get their share. Now let's go inside and see what we can cook up in the kitchen. I picked a couple pumpkins from my garden this year, and I've been using them as decorations. They're still pretty hard. They haven't started to rot at all. And I'm going to be using them, freezing them, and then I'll have pumpkin to use in pumpkin pies, cookies, and other pumpkin desserts and scones and all kinds of things, muffins. Lots of uses for pumpkin. It's also very healthy. It is about as healthy as squash. And in fact, plain pumpkin would be served as squash, and nobody probably would know the difference. The canned pumpkin tends to be a little darker in color and may actually be a type of squash, I have heard. But my pumpkin, I will cut off the top, scoop out all the seeds as if I were going to make a jack-o'-lantern, and then cut it in pieces, wrap it in foil, and cook it in a 350 oven until it gets very soft. At that point, I will peel the pieces, put them into the food processor, process it until it is the consistency that I want. If there's any water that forms during the roasting, I will make sure that I pour that off or use a paper towel to absorb it. I don't want the pumpkin puree to be too liquid. So then once I have everything blended into a nice consistency, I'll put it into freezer boxes, label it, and store it in the freezer for future use. And then I can use it to make a pumpkin pie or any of the other things. I try to do about 15 ounces per container, which is about the same as a can of pumpkin. Many of the recipes call for the can of pumpkin. So if you do the same amount by weight, you'll know that you have the right amount. Now I'm going to make a very quick and easy centerpiece, and I'm going to use some mini pumpkins from the store. You could use gourds, you could use fake pumpkins, and what I'm going to be doing is putting them into the base and making a base for some flowers, and just leaving a little bit on the edge in the back so that I can add some of the things I've harvested from my garden or garden walks. And there's some yarrow and some sweet Annie, which I grew in my garden, and also some goldenrod that's gone to seed. And I'm just going to put those in. We're going to shorten these down a little bit, and I think I can just do it this way since I didn't bring my clippers to the table. Some of them are a little tougher than others. I'll fold them up. And I'll add those to the back of the vase. Again, using the pumpkins to kind of hold them in place. And I have some grasses. This is the blue oat grass that will grow in the shade. And I love it because it is a nice fall color and design here. I have a teasel. If you had any chrysanthemums or dahlias left, you could add those in. And then I have a tree of crab apples, and I'm just going to use a few of them as an accent. These won't last all that long, but long enough for the centerpiece to be used. And I'm going to have to turn it around and do a little work on it because I can't see too well from this angle. But you get the idea. Some grasses and other things in that you've collected, just fall things, and then the pumpkins to hold it in place in your vase. And that makes a nice fall arrangement for a buffet table. Maybe we'll put in some more of the crab apple. I've got another big stalk here. See if that'll fit up the back. Again, it was hanging over the driveway and needed to be moved anyway, so I'll rearrange things a little bit. And then just put the pumpkin next to it. And you have a fall arrangement. Very quick and easy. Now let's go in the kitchen and do a little cooking. I'm going to today make something that can be used for Thanksgiving as an hors d'oeuvre, or anytime really, and even if you just have some friends in for drinks. And that's a charcuterie platter. I looked up charcuterie, and it in French is cooked meat, or meat cooked, and basically it's a platter of smoked or salted or cooked meats. It can include all types of sausages, mostly pork products, and also pâtés and other types of preserved meats. They are very popular now in the press, in magazines, and Pinterest, and online. And the charcuterie platter often includes the meat. That's one of the things, although I have seen vegetarian ones, which is kind of not quite a charcuterie platter, but it is a cheese board, more or less. But meat is one of the main things on a real charcuterie platter. And so I'm going to put on some gloves since I will be handling some items that are meant to be eaten without cooking. And food-safe gloves are available now, and they can be used in the kitchen, and very good, especially if you have a cut on your hand or something and you want to keep things very sterile. I'm going to start with some prosciutto, and I've already added a little fruit. I'm using my cornucopia basket in honor of the season of Thanksgiving, and the cornucopia is a kind of symbol of Thanksgiving, and Horn of Plenty is also what it's known. And I'm also going to use some pepperoni, and we'll put that on. So the first thing I'll put on are the meats, and I don't have quite as much, and I have some salami, and some of the things show salami turned into a rose. The way they do it is in a wine glass. I tried it. I did not have much luck with that. However, just folding it by hand seems to work pretty well. And you may need a toothpick to secure things a little bit. The idea is to kind of make a decorative platter. Of the meats, and a toothpick probably would help quite a bit here. I happen to have one. You can form these into a little rosette or rose and put some more around it. And I would probably take a little more time with it. And perhaps add a little extra meat here and there. And more of the pepperoni. This is an example. Then the next thing would be the cheeses. And it's good to have a hard cheese, harder cheese. I have some provolone, which I will add. And again, it's working to be somewhat decorative. As you do this, you want to make an attractive setting. The meats and cheeses. And a soft cheese is always good. I have a piece of blue cheese. You could use camembert or one of the other soft cheeses. And then some cheddar jack. A variety is nice. And we'll add a little more here. And then we want to add some other items. And we need some crackers to go with this. And I'm going to, you can use small bread slices, crackers, and again, spreading things out a little bit is good. I also have some little breadsticks. A little pile of those is good. Put some of those in. And you can just keep adding things and filling it up. And over. And then some other items. You want to add fruit. Fruit goes well with the cheese and the meats. And you can add some that's sliced already, which is, I have some of the apple that I sliced. And I used some lemon juice on it to keep it from turning. Pears could also be used that way. As you see, I have several pears, a red pear, a Bosc pear, and a Bartlett pear already on, and an apple. But you could just use sliced fruit if you wished. Also some grapes are very nice with it. And we'll put some of the grapes coming out of the basket. And maybe a few of them. I have some clusters of grapes here. That's a nice small cluster we'll put over here. Again, varying the placement of things. Other things that go with it would be some apricots, dried apricots. And we'll put a few of those on. And nuts. I have some pistachio nuts. I can add a few of those here and there. I think my grapes need to go up a little higher here. There, that's a little better. A few nuts. Again, you could use a bigger platter too. Whatever size you happen to have. I'd happen to have this nice round wooden one. You can even add a few cookies. Many of them have some chocolates or cookies added. These are little cranberry shortbreads. And I'll put some of those around the back on that side. And if we got space over there, sure. So it just takes a little time and effort to put together. Oh, the other thing I have are a few cornichons. And I'll put some of those down here with the salami. These are our tiny little pickles. They're a little French pickle, which are quite tasty. And I have also some spreads. We have a mustard, and I have a little wooden container with a little spoon that can go with that. And I also have some, I'll move the meat up a little bit, fig jam, or any type of jam, or even some honey can be put on as well. And then we will accent it with some of the rosemary. I brought my rosemary inside for the winter, but I'm still able to pick off some nice stems of it. And we can use that here and there as an accent around the other items. So this is how you would make the platter. And you can add whatever you like. But your foundation would be the smoked meats. And there we have the platter. I'll put that over aside so you can see what else I'm going to do a little later. Now, some other things I'm going to talk about today are what you can do with leftovers. Everybody has turkey left over, and they have pumpkin, and they have cranberry sauce. You buy the can of cranberry sauce or make it, and there's always some left. So we'll talk about what to do with that too. I'm going to start by making a turkey tetrazzini, and this is a very good use for leftover turkey. You can also use it with chicken if you have chicken meat. It works with that. And I need to move a few of these items over. I'm going to start out with a 1/4 cup of butter, and I'm going to melt that in my saucepan. I've already cooked 7 ounces of spaghetti noodles, and I broke them up. I find that if you have a casserole that has spaghetti in it, it's often easier to eat if you break the pieces up into maybe 3 pieces instead of the long strings. I'll add a 1/4 cup of flour and a 1/2 teaspoon of salt. And we will combine that until all of the liquid has been absorbed into the flour. And we have a nice roux. Then I want to add a cup of chicken broth. And I'll add that and mix it in as I go. And 1 cup of 1/2 and 1/2. Or you could probably use milk, or 1/2 heavy cream and 1/2 milk, but 1/2 and 1/2 works well. It gives it a little richness. And I'm going to stir this together until it comes to a boil. It's starting to boil, and I'm going to keep stirring it so that it doesn't stick to the bottom, and our flour has thickened it. We want to boil it a minute to get rid of any floury taste, although it will be going into the oven later for extra cooking. We have our sauce. And I'm going to turn my heat off and let it continue to boil a minute. And it's a nice consistency. As you can see, it's thickened somewhat. It's the sauce of a medium white sauce. And then I will add some cheddar cheese, and I'm adding a 1/4 pound of shredded cheddar, white cheddar. And needing to pick up a piece off the stove, perhaps. Take that part out too. There. We'll stir in the cheese. It's melting in. And then I will add 3 ounces of canned mushrooms, small can. And if you're using fresh mushrooms, just cook them a bit, brown them up in the butter before you add the flour and the liquids. But the canned mushrooms work just fine. And our chopped turkey, or chicken if you prefer. And 2 tablespoons of sherry. And I don't use cooking sherry because cooking sherry has salt, so I just use a regular dry sherry. We'll stir that in. And the 7 ounces of cooked spaghetti. And stir that around well. Get it coated. Turkey sandwiches are good, but sometimes you need a little change, and this is decidedly a little change. And you could even use it as a company meal. I'm going to put it into a greased casserole dish. And I'll top this with a 1/2 cup of Parmesan cheese, shredded Parmesan cheese, which will brown nicely in the oven. And that will go into a 350-degree oven for 30 minutes. I'm not going to put it in just yet. You can also put it in the refrigerator until a little later if you want to make it ahead and then have it ready to go in the oven about the time your guests come and are enjoying your charcuterie platter. For dessert, I'm going to make a pumpkin mousse, and this is using cream cheese as well, so it's kind of a cheesecake mousse. And I am mixing 4 ounces of cream cheese with a 1/2 cup of brown sugar and a 1/2 cup of pumpkin. And I'm going to use my mixer and hopefully not make a total mess by combining these ingredients. And I also want to add a teaspoon of pumpkin pie spice. To the mixture. And we're going to mix that with the mixer until it's kind of light and fluffy, and hopefully not make too big a mess here. And clearly I'm going to have to stop and scrape it down every once in a while to get it completely smooth. And that looks pretty good. And now it's time for the second part. And I happen to have 2 sets of beaters for my mixer, which comes in handy at this point. If you don't, you'll have to wash them. Or start with the second part first. And then I have 1 cup of heavy cream, and I'm going to add 2 tablespoons of sugar to that, and I've already added a 1/2 teaspoon of vanilla. And I'm going to whip the cream. That didn't take very long at all. At this point, I want to put about 3/4 of the whipped cream into the pumpkin mixture. And I'm going to fold that in. This recipe, this is a half recipe. If you wanted to make more of it, you could double the ingredients. Use a full 8-ounce package of cream cheese instead of the 4 ounces, and 7 ounces of pumpkin. instead of the half amount, which was 4. Okay, there's our pumpkin mousse. And to serve that up, I'm going to put it in some little glasses. It is rich, as you can notice. And we'll just put some in each of our little cups. And then add a little whipped cream on top. I would have plenty here for 4 to 6 servings of this size. And then I'm going to put a toasted pecan on each one. You could use a candy corn or a candy pumpkin or whatever you might have. And so we'll put this out and let me assemble some of the things that we've made today. Another thing that I've made and didn't make today due to lack of time are muffins using your leftover cranberry sauce. I think everybody has a little bit of cranberry sauce left over. So basically I used just a regular plain muffin recipe and then stirred in, not with the mixer, but with a spoon, just lightly stirred in some leftover cranberry sauce. And I used about 3/4 of a cup, but you could definitely use less. And you could use either the jellied or the whole berry sauce and just stir it in. You might want to use a little less sugar in your recipe since those are sweetened products. But you can make nice cranberry muffins with some of the leftover cranberry sauce. Cranberry sauce is also very good served with the turkey tetrazzini, so you could just put a dish of that out as well. I'd like to wish everybody a Thanksgiving. I'm Liz Davey, and you've watched A Walk in the Garden on NCTV, Norfolk Community Cable. I'd like to thank the staff at Norfolk Community Cable for all the work they've done helping to produce and run this show and put it on the air for you to enjoy.